This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We are on to the quarterfinals in this year's World Cup as the round of 16 has wrapped up. We're going to break down that round of 8 and talk about some matches, talk about some other bets we like for this week by bringing in Dr. Ed Feng and getting his read on the rest of the field. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as mentioned, by Dr. Ed Feng. Find his work over at thepowerrank.com. Ed, we are on to the quarterfinals for the World Cup. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Had a friend in town. We watched a lot of World Cup, hung out, so I can't complain at all.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the U.S.'s loss to the Netherlands. We're going to talk about other stuff that happened during the round of 16 and also take a look forward to the round of 8 as well. But Ed, I was cruising Twitter today, and I saw our friend Andrew Percival was tweeting about how he backtests college football, and he backtests all these models and sees what they do against the spread and straight up. And your college football numbers this year have actually beaten the market. You have been better at picking straight up winners than even closing lines, which is kind of insane. So A, congrats. That's pretty sick. But B, nice. What happened to make the numbers be so good this year?
I mean, look, I think it's a little bit of good fortune that it's doing so well straight up against the closing markets. Actually, if I could plug it a little bit, over the last 4 seasons in the NFL, I've actually done better straight up than the closing markets. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's probably not exactly the hugest sample size. But anyways, I feel a little bit more confident with NFL. But it's clearly nice that things are doing pretty well. I mean, and I think like if you bet these numbers early, you're also going to be doing pretty well. If you try to use my numbers only and bet on Saturday mornings, that's probably not going to get you too far. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been really good. Again, I've talked a lot on this show about how the model works and how it tends to be pretty aggressive, and I think those aggressive adjustments have worked out pretty well this year. And I think it's a good omen heading into bowl pool season, where you are asked to pick the outcome of games straight up. And I always think it's a useful tool to use my numbers to help you win your bowl pool, but probably even a little bit more so this year.
And in the past, you've done like bowl guides. I'm assuming this year with the World Cup, that's probably not going to happen. Am I correct in that assumption?
No, it'll happen. I'll get to it next week.
How? Where is the time coming from for you to do this?
I don't know. Not really sure, but yeah, no, there'll be one up next week. I'm kind of making the assumption that no one cares about their bowl pool this week. Yeah, and that if it happens early next week, there'll be plenty of time before. I believe the first game kicks off not this Saturday, but the Saturday after.
We don't get CLV in bowl pools, so there's really no advantage to being early on those. So that's awesome. I just want to congratulate you on a good year for your numbers. You had another one of those. So like part of the reason why you're able to beat the spreads is because you had a lot of underdogs that your model favored straight up, and got one of those on Friday with the Utah win. I don't know if you had them straight up, but you had them plus 2.5 against USC. Yeah. So that was a nice one too. I know obviously the Caleb Williams injury factored into that, but I mean, you had a good year. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was a good year. I did have Utah straight up in that game. I actually purposely didn't say it in the newsletter that I had Utah by 4 points because it's never good to be off the market by 7 points. So I wasn't explicit about that, but I had Utah by 4. And, I mean, my reasons for liking Utah in that game were USC's absurd turnover margin that was going to tend to regress and USC's terrible defense. And while I would argue that neither of those things came to fruition in the first half, they both came out full force in the second half. And it was a nice little win there.
Yeah, good way to close out the year. We'll talk more college football, getting ready for the playoffs, but overall, very good year for Ed's numbers over at thepowerrank.com. We're going to dig into the quarterfinals of the World Cup here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. On that feed, you will find our NFL Week 14 first look, breaking down what my numbers are saying about this week's markets. Get that there. And also, our NFL Week 14 full preview with Ryan Williams coming up tomorrow, and player prop breakdown on the JJ Zacharyson later on as well. All those up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed and over on the FanDuel YouTube page. So subscribe wherever you prefer to take in this podcast. With only a handful of Monday Night Football games remaining left this season, FanDuel and Visa are coming together to make sure the excitement surrounding Monday nights is at an all-time high. Introducing Monday Night Perfect Picks presented by Visa, a free-to-play contest series on FanDuel that gives you a chance to win a share of $10,000 in cash prizes courtesy of Visa. Here's how it works. You'll be presented with 10 questions centered around on-field action for Monday night's NFL game. Fans who answer the most questions correctly will win their share of $10,000 in total prizes. If that's easy. The contest is now live, so at FanDuel.com/free/contest/Visa Perfect Picks and make your picks before Monday night. That's FanDuel.com/free/contest/Visa Perfect Picks. No purchase necessary. Age and location restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See full terms at FanDuel.com. Visa and its financial institutions have not sponsored or offered this promotion in any way. Let's shift our focus now to the World Cup. Before we take a look at the quarterfinals, I did want to go back to the round of 16, talk about that USA versus Netherlands matchup, and kind of give a postmortem here on the US. What were your final thoughts on the US and what we saw from them in this year's tournament?
So I've been screaming as loud as I can about how Gio Reyna should be on the pitch and how he can play center forward. So a 9 is usually your center forward. This is supposed to be your goal scorer. The U.S. has history's worst tradition of producing center forwards. We really haven't had a good one since probably ever, but certainly since I've been really watching the sport over the last 20 some years. And if you don't have a good center forward, just put your most talented player up there. And Gio Reyna came in the second half, and I was pretty happy. And then Gio Reyna didn't really play that well, so that was a little bit disappointing. He had a nice little give and go with Brendan Aronson, but so I was a little bit disappointed in that. But I kind of like the idea. They call this like a false 9. You essentially put like a talented smaller player at your center forward. Spain won a World Cup with that in 2010, and so yeah, it was nice to see Reyna get on there. I was disappointed that he couldn't do better. He kind of looked like Weston McKennie in that he wasn't really his full self. Looks like he's still coming back from injury. I unfortunately haven't had too much of a chance to see him at Dortmund, but out there, at least in 40-ish minutes, he didn't look like the Gio Reyna that we all know. And so either that could just be the small sample size or just that he's not quite back from an injury. The other thing is that the Dutch finished really, really well.
Yeah.
They had a couple they hit 3 one-timers that all went into the back of the net. And if you don't watch much soccer, you'd be like, oh, well, they're great at finishing. But to just give you a sense for how hard that was, like in the France game, there was like a perfect cross that like got onto the foot of Olivier Giroud, who is France's all-time leader in goals scored, and he was unable to finish it. It was a tap-in that I would argue that was arguably easier than any of the 3 goals that the Dutch scored. So I think the U.S. got a little bit unlucky. They were pretty even on expected goals. One of them was that third goal where it was just kind of a defensive bust that no one was back at the back post there. So I think the Dutch are a little bit overrated. So I don't see them going too much further, although we'll talk a little bit about how I think the markets are coming around to the fact that Argentina was a little bit overrated at the beginning of the tournament as well. Should be a fun match, very skilled match, a good one to watch. And then also, I think the future is pretty bright for the U.S.
Yeah.
You have a core of Christian Pulisic, Brendan Aronson, Gio Reyna, Weston McKennie, the Serginho Dest, and actually we should probably put Tim Weah into that group right now. Those 6 players are really strong players that are playing Champions League level club soccer in Europe. And that's a core you can build on. The problem is like 4 of those guys are wingers. 4 of those 6 players are wingers, which makes it really hard to get them all on the field at the same time. But we do have a good core. If you're the odds that we get a great center forward in 4 years before we host the World Cup in 2026 are pretty small. Yeah. But maybe we can get some help at center back. We could use a little bit of help there in terms of getting the quick passing game that we all like to see the U.S. play. And I mean, I think there's a lot to look forward to. I think it was good for them to get out of this group. Obviously, want a little bit more in the round of 16, but I don't think this is the first time that the U.S. has spent a lot of energy and effort getting out of a reasonably hard group to not hit their highest energy level in the round of 16 and go out. It's kind of where you expect, like the 16th best team in the world to end up in the World Cup. We always hope for better, but maybe we'll see that in 4 years when we have a little home field advantage.
So this can be hard to extrapolate because it is pretty far out. But what do you think the ceiling is because they have that young core? Are we talking like it's a legit ceiling? I know that's tough. That's a tough question to answer right now. But where do you see that ceiling being?
I mean, I've always wanted to see this team be a top 10 team in the world. And I really thought with this generation of players that we would get there. Unfortunately, I think the rest of the world is also getting better.
Yeah.
England in 2022 is simply just not the same England of 2010, where the US and England also played in a World Cup. England is really advanced. Their youth development is getting better and better. I mean, Germany's a lot better team. I know the results don't show it in this World Cup, but Germany was brilliant and continues to get better. The French are always going to be talented. So, I mean, I think I would love to see them be a top 10 team and a team that you expect to get into the quarterfinals. We're not quite there yet. I'm not exactly sure how we get there either without, a couple, getting another couple of great players. But we'll see.
Now, you alluded to Germany. Let's talk about other round of 16 takeaways. Obviously, they did not advance, but you correctly predicted the way that match would play out in terms of like chaos. You said over 3.5 goals, minus 118. You were like, hey, it's a fish bet, but I think it's the right side. And it was very much the right side because that game was wild. Any other big takeaways for you from the round of 16?
Yeah, Spain. Let's talk about Spain. It's just such a talented team. One I really like to watch play. But a team that's a little bit too interested in possessing the ball and not enough interested in scoring the ball. So after they won 7-0 versus Costa Rica, and I think had 3 XG in the game. And 3 XG in the game, so 3 expected goals is huge. Yeah, the huge total. At least according to I get my stuff from or at least this morning I looked at FB Ref. Another good source is XG Philosophy on Twitter. He'll post these things. Well, he or she will post these things on Twitter after the games. But Spain didn't exceed 1 XG again since that Costa Rica match. And I don't know. I mean, with all that talent, I think you have to be a little bit more aggressive. You have to attack. You have to try to create more scoring opportunities, and they didn't. And just completely flamed out. That penalty kick shootout against Morocco was which was kind of insane. I think the markets you should usually think of these penalty shootouts as a toss-up. I think the markets were favoring Spain, which I thought was correct. I think you should kind of favor the more skillful team, but that did not work out in the slightest bit. So they flamed out. And honestly, that was the only real upset. Pretty chalky round of 16 in 7 of the 8 matches. Definitely had some excitement here and there. But and I think it sets up for a lot of heavyweight battles going down the stretch here.
Give any thoughts around that Germany match? Obviously disappointing down in advance, but like it was an interesting, that group specifically was wild. I thought that it was interesting there as well. Yeah,
for sure. So Germany goes up 1-0 and Spain goes up 1-0 and Germany is essentially through. And what happened, I thought Germany was brilliant the first 10 minutes. And then they kind of took their foot off the gas, which I thought was the wrong strategy because you certainly could have ended up in a situation like eventually happened that Japan beats Spain and then you're screwed because you can't beat Spain on goal differential because Spain put up 7-0 against Costa Rica and now you are playing Costa Rica. So that game goes into half and it's only 1-0 Germany. My over 3.5 is not looking good. And so at the half, you're just kind of sitting there like, okay, what's going on? Second half starts. Japan scores not 1, but 2 goals. The second of which was controversial. Actually, I think the right call.
I saw an angle of it. I don't think they showed in the broadcast, but an angle where it was pretty clearly like still in. I thought.
Yeah.
From that.
No, I think it was clearly in, and obviously like that goal screwed Germany, and Germany ends up going home. But I think in the second half, you saw just how explosive Germany is. I mean, that's kind of how I expected. That's kind of what I expected them to do against Costa Rica, and they scored at will, and it easily goes over. But they can't. I mean, there's no way they were going to get. Look, even if they put the pedal to the metal in the first half and went all out the entire game, it's unlikely that they pass Spain in goal differential with the way it happens, right? So,
yeah.
But yeah, at least my bet won, and I mean, I thought Germany played really well against Japan. They just allowed a couple counterattack goals that, could they have done better? Sure. But they lost that when Japan got that second goal. And it's a shame. I mean, honestly, like they're going to be favored at home in Euro in 2 years because they're going to have the home field advantage. So we'll see. They fired one of the head honchos in the FA, but they have not fired the coach yet. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, that day of like the chaos of that group was fun.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed, as again, a very, very, very aggressively casual observer. I had a lot of fun with that for sure. Okay, let's look forward now to the quarterfinal matches. We got all 4 quarterfinal matches set, and the lines are set over at FanDuel Sportsbook. When you look at those beginning Friday, any value you see at FanDuel Sportsbook for those, Ed?
Yeah, so I'm going to not go with my public type overbet that I had last time. I really think you should be betting under goals in this. I think I said this last time, the win-loss draw market is going to be incredibly efficient as you head into the kickoff of these matches. We still have a little bit of time before Saturday's matches. So, I mean, you can kind of tell the holds aren't quite what they will be Friday and Saturday morning, but I still would not recommend trying to find value in those markets. Try to go into different markets, and I'll talk about another one later. France and England is really the heavyweight battle here in this quarterfinals. It should be a heck of a match. It's very, very close. France is a slight favorite to advance over England. Honestly, I think this England team is really good. I think it's a really talented team. But I do like the under in this. My numbers have it. You can get minus 126 for under 2.5 goals here. I think this is going to be it's a pretty tight game. It's going to be England's probably going to sit back and try to counterattack, even though they don't really have to. I think France, maybe a little bit overrated just with the way that Mbappe kind of finished some chances in the round of 16 matchup. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a tight one. You can kind of tell by the win-loss draw market, the probability for a draw is the highest in this one amongst all the 4 matches. And I think it's going to be tight. I like under 2.5 goals. You can get it at minus 126 at FanDuel. Every time I've talked about a bet on the show, I think FanDuel has moved against me. So maybe you can wait a little bit on this. I don't know.
We'll call it an odds boost. Let's call it that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think John's listening to this and moving the other way just to. But
gotta mess with your psyche a little bit. The tie market there is plus 220 for the England versus France match. You don't have to recommend a bet for this one, but how do you see that one playing out in terms of who you think will advance in that game? Because it is, like you said, a super high profile matchup.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be tight. I think I've been kind of underestimating England over the last year. I think they really have gotten better. France is just so talented. Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I think maybe the further you get into it, if it does go to the penalty shootouts, I would like France. I like France's chances because I do think they're a little bit more skilled in that area. But I don't know. I think both teams are going to be tight, and they're not going to want to give up advantages, and hence the under here.
All right. So under 2.5, as you said, is minus 126 at FanDuel Sportsbook for France and England. Any other bets you're seeing right now, whether it be match bets for the quarterfinals or any other markets you like right now?
Yeah, you kind of sent me an email about the outright market, and I think the outright market is pretty fair.
Mm-hmm.
You're still looking at Brazil as a pretty big favorite, and I think that makes a lot of sense because I don't know how much resistance Croatia is going to be able to give them in this quarterfinal. Croatia's old. and Brazil is talented. So they have the easiest way to get through at least this round into the semis. And now, France has the hardest matchup, but they are the second favorite. And I think that says a lot about, the markets consider France as the second best favorite now, whereas that was Argentina at the beginning of the tournament. So I think the markets have kind of flipped there. You would kind of hope, I kind of wish I would have bet Portugal at the beginning of the tournament because they are such a talented team overall. And they benched Ronaldo for this last game, and his backup scored a hat trick. And, he's got a lot of work to do. He's obviously very talented and, more talented than any center forward that the U.S. has ever produced or might ever produce. But he's going to have to do a lot of work to be known anything other than the guy who replaced Ronaldo in the 2022 World Cup. But he was brilliant. And yeah, I mean, who knows who they're going to start there? I don't think you can start Ronaldo, who doesn't even start for Man U at this point, over this kid. I don't think you can do that. So Portugal's been great. So I do think that outright market is pretty sharp right now. So one thing I will recommend, if you go over to DraftKings, they pretty much have you can bet on even odd for total goals. And they're pretty much putting up markets that have it 50-50. And that really shouldn't be the case with some of these expected low scoring games like France, England. You would expect it to be a little bit favored towards even, simply because the possibility of 0, the possibility of 2 is going to be a little bit more in a low scoring game. So, you can bet France, England minus 110 to be even. I think there is some value there. I think the probability should probably be closer to 54%. And the same applies for Argentina and the Netherlands. There over at DK, it's going to be minus 115, but I still think there's value there in betting even for the goal total.
Well, that's a very creative market. I think that's a fun way to do it. Now, going back to the outrights, obviously, I'm not seeing any value there, but you mentioned Argentina. They're down to plus 550. Is that more in line with where your numbers have them, or are they still overvalued broadly in the market in your eyes?
I don't really know. That feels about right. In my numbers, they're lower. They're top 10, but kind of in the lower in the top 10. That seems about right given their matchup with the Netherlands, something that they should be a favorite in. My numbers have the Netherlands overrated for whatever reason. But yeah, that seems about right with Argentina and Portugal in about the same place. I think those nations are about the same. They're not as good as Brazil and France. But they're still talented.
All right. Well, we got these games, these matches kicking off on Friday. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see how things play out here. We'll have more World Cup talk coming up on the show, obviously, as we get closer to the end. It's going to be a lot of fun, but it's been a pleasure to talk with you, Ed, throughout the tournament already, but still plenty more to come in that regard. Before we let you go, Ed, though, got to ask, what is going on for you this week at the Power Rank? Where can people find your World Soccer numbers if they are on the search for that?
Yeah, check it out at thepowerrank.com. I've been pretty fortunate that the World Soccer Rankings picked up a lot of search engine juice, and so it's actually the most visited page on the site. And so come over and check it out. I also have predictions for all 4 of the quarterfinal matches, both win, loss, draw, and the probability to move on. So you can check that out. And then while you're there, you can sign up for my free sports betting email newsletter. Try to give out tips and bets like Utah USC and a lot of stuff heading into bowl season. So check that out at thepowerrank.com.
Yeah, that would include all member numbers, signing up for that for college football, the bowls. Going to be, I'm sure, a delight for you to deal with all the opt-outs, the coaching stuff. So Godspeed, Ed. Yeah. Enjoy. I'm sure that'll be a lot of fun. But check that out over at the Power Rank.
We'll do my best.
And check out Ed's podcast, the Football Analytics Show. You can find Ed on Twitter at the Power Rank. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. We are back once again tomorrow to break down NFL Week number 14 with Ryan Williams. Make sure you subscribe to Covering the Spread to get that right as it goes live. We'll talk to you then. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.